Tatiana, and welcome to the World Vegan Travel Podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on because we're going to be talking about some really interesting places today, some of which I've been to and some which are completely new to me. You have an extremely interesting background and what you're doing now. I think we can safely say you're multi-passionate.
Yes.
So just give us a little bit of an idea of what it is that you're doing now, and then we'll talk about how you got to this point.
Sure. So currently I am a student in marine biology. I'm doing a master's in marine biology at University College Cork. So just in this exact moment, I'm actually in Dublin. I'm cat sitting 4 different cats over the winter break. But in a few days, I go back to Cork where I've been for a few months, and I'm going to start my master thesis in April, but that one I'm doing in Portugal.
Oh my goodness. Okay. You're not originally from Ireland.
I'm not, as you can probably tell from my accent. Yeah, I'm a mixture. My dad is German Lebanese, my mom is Mexican Spanish, and I grew up quite nomadic,
Wow.
just like my dad. He also grew up moving around a lot, and my ancestors from all sides have been very nomadic for both my mom and my dad. So it's really in my blood.
Let's talk about that. Like, what is it that brought you to this point? What is it that your family did that meant that you were so nomadic? And what were some of the amazing places that you ended up in?
Yes, good question, because I think many people don't quite know, but they hear my accent, they see me, they don't really know where I am. I say I'm a global citizen. That's how my little tiny Instagram is, Global Citizen Tati. So my dad's mom, the Lebanese one, her parents left Lebanon fleeing the Lebanese civil war and ended up like many in Mexico, not knowing how to read and write. And they brought up 9 children, and most of them did go to university. My grandma was the lucky one. She got to go to university. My dad's German. My grandpa, who I never met, he was originally from Berlin, but during World War II, they left, and he also ended up studying abroad in the US. And then he met my grandma in Greece, actually. They had 4 children, one of them being my dad's, and they moved around between Germany, Mexico, and Bolivia when my grandpa was working in the steel industry, and my grandma was teaching pharmacology in Mexico. And then from my mom's side, her dad is Mexican, but even his ancestors, he has some Scottish, French blood. And my grandma, she is German, Spanish, and both her parents also left. My Spanish great-grandmother left the Civil War in Spain, and then my great-grandfather was trying to help people in the medical field in different countries. And so they also ended up meeting in Europe, but then coming to Mexico. I was born in Germany, and my dad, working as a chemical engineer, but also switching jobs, was sent around to different places in Europe. So I grew up between Germany, France, Austria, Mexico, and a little bit the States.
Oh my
Studies.
goodness.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. And if I remember and heard you well, like your great grandparents, people fleeing because of war and also family moving around because of work. I guess in a lot of situations like that, people would just prefer to feel settled in one spot. But it seems that your family just embraced moving around. And that is an assumption that I'm making right now. Maybe they had to move around a lot because it was economically necessary. I don't know. But that's so interesting.
I would say that indeed it was, they really embraced it. I think that's a really good way to put it because of different reasons. And I still embrace it. Nowadays, actually, many of my cousins have fully embraced it. I think the younger generation's prone to travel a lot anyways. But yes, we all keep moving around. My sister, she's a bit more settled than I am. I just have more that travel gene in me. But it's also up to everyone to decide how much they want to make of their genetics or not.
Absolutely. And living in all of these different places as a younger person, how do you think that shaped you to the person that you are today?
I definitely think it made me become a lot more open-minded to different ideas, to different cultures, to wanting to see the world. And I know that even though I've been very fortunate, I know it's a privilege to travel that much, I've just scratched the surface. And this is a never-ending journey. I think that because my parents were themselves multicultural, we grew up with different foods, traditions, personalities clashing, but also personalities coming together. Whenever I go abroad, I really try to be open to new ideas and not judge right away, and try to learn as much as I can from new cultures, try to go a bit behind the scenes and not try to be the typical tourist. Yeah, I'd say like those are my biggest takeaways from it. But I have to say, even with me going, especially solo traveling a lot, I have also made my parents become more open-minded than both of them already were.
Amazing. And yeah, I've really noticed that when I was looking at your travel resume, so to speak. You seek out different experiences when you are traveling. You're not just going and visiting a couple of museums or sitting on the beach or enjoying the food. You're really putting yourself out there to have different experiences and not just staying in hotels and things like that. That's something that I definitely noticed from your resume. And how is it that you became vegan amongst all of this?
Yes, I was thinking about that, and I've been vegan for almost 12 years. It's one day after my birthday. It's going to be in February. So when I was a freshman during my undergrad at University of California, San Diego, I was going back to my room, and in the common room, I think one of my roommates must have gotten one of those pamphlets from one animal rights organization. I can't remember which one, but I did see them hand those out on campus sometimes. And so I picked it up and flipped through it, and I saw a pig and a chicken in a factory farm and thought, this is horrible. I'd never seen it. No one got really exposed to that. And so I thought about it, and I decided to go pescatarian for a while. So I did try some vegan ice cream, some soy milk, some tofu, and I really liked it. And after a year plus thinking about that, I thought, okay, I'm just going to go vegan. I knew what vegan was, but I didn't know any vegan, but I just went for it. And shortly after, I studied abroad in Hong Kong. And that was actually 11 years ago. So it's also fun that I've just chosen 11 experiences now. It's all that 11, and I'm February 11. That was just a coincidence I was thinking about today. And still 11 years vegan, not 12 yet. When I started out in Hong Kong, there was so much tofu there and these meat alternatives. And that just then really made me commit to it, even though I was already vegan before going to Hong Kong. But yeah, in Hong Kong, I just stuck to it, tried all these different fruits and vegetables that I found on the markets, and got very involved in the movement.
Okay. Well, let's talk about your Zen experiences. I know you've been to a lot more than 11 places, 11 countries, but you've particularly decided to talk about 11 places that gave you a Zen experience. Why did you decide to choose places that gave you a Zen experience rather than the most adventurous or favorite or nicest beaches? Or why did you choose Zen? Are you a practicing Zen meditator or you just love to feel relaxed? Tell me.
Yes, I'm not a Zen meditator or Buddhist, but I do love going to Buddhist temples. I am definitely a very adventurous person. I love exhilarating things. I do a lot of crazy sports and try everything out. But I think at the end of the day, I was always a bit timid, and I still love having a small community or doing a lot solo, and especially finding moments of peace in nature, in small towns, in temples. I think back at the most memorable moments I've had, and many of them were some that had to do with calmness and peace, whether that was in nature or in a temple or me sitting in my Airbnb and watching the sunset. We say life's about happiness. We're always chasing happiness. But in the past years, I've noticed it's really not so much about happiness. Happiness is temporary. It's about that peace in the middle, where if you have bad or good moments, you always come back to this peace in the middle. And that's something that I've been trying to really remind myself when I'm going through ups and downs, especially in the past year and a half or so that has been a bit tricky. And so this Zen describes this peace for me of always trying to come back to the middle and still be appreciative of what I have, even when it's not always easy.
Fabulous. Let's start our list of 11. I'm so excited because some of these places are also my favorite places too. So I'm very interested to hear your perspective. Let's go ahead. Let's start with number one.
Sure. So number one is Hong Kong. As I mentioned previously, I studied abroad there in 2014, and it was really where my solo travel started. So it was also my first time in East Asia. Before that, I'd only been to Jordan with my parents. I traveled to different countries, at the beginning a bit with friends, but then in the end, a friend ditched me last minute and I decided just to go on my own. And it was the most amazing experience. So I ended up solo traveling in Cambodia and Myanmar before going back to Hong Kong. And that's where I fell in love with Asia, with East Asia and Southeast Asia, with solo travel, and with starting to feel really empowered as a solo traveling woman. And I think that's when I proved to myself that I can get a lot done without having to rely on other people. and also finding peace and satisfaction with my own company. I owe a lot to Hong Kong. I've not been able to go back since. I know it's changed a lot, but I was just recently looking at hotels thinking I have to go. I owe Hong Kong a lot. And I also hiked a lot there, which many people don't think of. They're amazing hikes and amazing beaches. All my hikes ended up at a beach. And that's what also marked a lot my path to go more into nature conservation later on and look for jobs or volunteer experiences in nature.
Fabulous. Yes. And what drew you to Hong Kong in the first place as a study abroad destination? It's very contrasting choice compared with the other places that you had been exposed to. Was it just to get out of your comfort zone?
Actually, it was. So I was studying molecular biology at UCSD, and there weren't that many options to study abroad with that major where I could take classes for it. So the options were basically just Hong Kong or Australia. And I know Australia would have been amazing for the nature, but I knew it was going to be a lot more similar to the US, and I really wanted something different. So the program looked well. I could do 2 courses there that would count towards my bachelor's at UCSD, and then a few other ones. And I ended up organizing it on my own and not through UCSD. So it was going to be a bit cheaper for me as well. And when they accepted me and worked out, that was really the main reason. Many people were like, why Hong Kong out of all the places? And especially as a nature lover, and many people didn't know about the hiking. But there was a reason, and I ended up going, and it was the best choice.
Fabulous. Yes, a friend of mine, she got a job in Hong Kong and she's moving there in August and she is so excited about it. I've been to Hong Kong a couple of times. It is so fun and the food is amazing and the skyline is incredible. I haven't done much hiking, but of course I've enjoyed the views.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised that you like it. How did you go with the climate of living there for a decent amount of time? Because I don't love the Hong Kong climate. It's quite like Hanoi in Vietnam.
Yeah, so I went in August when it was really hot and humid, but I personally don't mind
Yes.
hot and humid. I know many people are like, hot and humid is the worst. I get a lot of migraines, so it's a bit of an issue. So hot and humid is actually not as bad for me as hot and dry, where I get a lot of migraines. And I think for me, it was perfect at the beginning. Then the monsoon season came, though, so that was also fun to experience when you had to stay only indoors for a few days. And then in December, it did get quite chilly. And I remember I went swimming a lot in the pool at the university and they didn't heat it up. And at the end, it was just too cold for me to go and I couldn't anymore. So I really had the full range, but also having had very cold winters in Germany before, I cannot complain really.
Fabulous. Fabulous. Okay. Your second Zen experience destination is an interesting one as well. Why don't you tell us about
Yes,
that?
Myanmar. And I know I just mentioned it because that was my second destination when solo traveling, or right from Cambodia. I hopped over and I have also not been able to go back. I was, I guess, in the lucky 10-ish years or so where it was quite safe and calm to go. And I splurged a little bit there and I did pay a little solo tour for myself of about 6 days. It wasn't that expensive because it was Myanmar, but that's what I'd saved up for when I worked at UCSD, all kinds of odd jobs. In Myanmar, I went to Bagan, so the temple savannah, as I call it, in the lake and Yangon. And I just felt that it was the perfect combination of East Asia and Southeast Asia in terms of culture. The people were very calm. I felt very safe in that moment. The food was amazing because it was this mixture of East Asian and Indian and Southeast Asian to me with a lot of tofu. And I told the tour guides I really love tofu. And so they'd always point out the tofu to me when we got to restaurants. It was so sweet of them. And especially Bagan, just sitting on the temples at sunset with just a few other tourists around was probably one of the most Zen experiences out of all of the ones I've had.
Yeah.
And that's when I felt so lucky to be there in nature with barely any people around. And I think that's also when that spark for travel kicked in. And I told myself, I want to keep doing this. This cannot just be my only solo travel that I do in this life. And also where I really felt so at peace in Asia and fell in love with Asia more than ever.
Yes, Myanmar is such an incredible destination. I also did a short visit there many 20 plus years ago now. And at that time, it was a little bit funny. You had to exchange 200 US dollars for 200 FECs, as it was a way for the Myanmar government to get hard currency into the country. And that was just a whole very weird thing to try to navigate. And the exchange rate was really bad for these FECs. Oh, it was just a whole weird thing. It was very different compared with its neighbor Thailand in terms of like the infrastructure. Oh my goodness, the trains were so bad. Like, the tracks were so bad. I didn't sleep a wink. And I was very accustomed to being on trains a lot at that time. And of course, the roads were really bad. I do hope it's improved. And of course, the situation there right now is very sad. But beautiful people, incredible places to visit, amazing destinations, and still very few visitors. It's amazing. Okay, let's go on to number
Next
3.
experience. So, Geraldine, New Zealand. So, after university, I did a few internships, and then I ended up moving to New Zealand on a work and holiday visa for almost a year. And I was mostly in Christchurch working in a small vegan vegetarian eco hotel. But at some point, I rented a car and did some solo road tripping. And I drove down all the way to Queenstown. And on the way back, friends from Christchurch asked me if I could pick them up. So I picked them up from another small town, but it had rained a lot the days before, not necessarily in Queenstown, but just in that area. So on our way back, we were about to cross a bridge, and a police officer stopped and said, the bridge has collapsed. You cannot go through. So you either wait till we put up this bridge again, or you go a huge route around to Christchurch. So it was getting late, and I was quite frustrated because I really wanted to go back. I'd also only rented the car till that day. My friends also wanted to go back. And I said, well, what do we do? Do we look for a small hotel and then we try to go back tomorrow or the day after if that works? But they both said that they didn't have any money. And I also didn't have much money, and I didn't want to pay a hotel for all 3 of us. So they said, why don't we sleep in the car? And I was not going to leave them alone. So I said, okay, let's sleep in the car. And while we were discussing all of this, on the side of the road, the police officer came over and said, do you know where to go? And we said, no, to be honest, no, we're probably just going to sleep here in the car for a night. And he said, look, there's a family that called and said that if somebody needs a place to stay for a few nights, you could stay with them. So we called her and we went over. It was a young couple. She was pregnant. And we were very lucky that the next day, actually, the bridge was back up and we could go through. But they would have been willing to host us for longer. And they were both super, super sweet and helpful. They took us to the supermarket and took us all around. The town was lovely. It was small, and people were also friendly and supporting each other because many people got stuck there. So that was just one of the experiences that stuck to me in New Zealand when thinking of the Kiwi kindness.
Yeah, that is so thoughtful. I can't imagine. I don't think it would occur to me, oh, the weather's really bad outside. I bet there's a few people stranded. Let me contact the police and offer my place just in case anyone needs it. I don't think my mind would ever go there with the mental gymnastics. That is so generous and kind of them. Wow.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Let's talk about Edinburgh.
Yes. So Edinburgh, I've been 2-3 times by now. Unfortunately, not more parts of Scotland. I just went a few months ago because my sister got married there. She lives in Texas. But the first time I went to Edinburgh was actually quite unplanned. I was supposed to go to Manchester for work, but plans changed. But I still had the flight. So I rebooked it to Edinburgh, and from there I ended up taking the train all the way down to Bristol. And so I was there for 2 nights and stayed in an Airbnb a little bit outside of the city. And there weren't a lot of tourists. I just felt like I got this insider view into Edinburgh. It was in the summer, which was, of course, not super hot, but it was just perfect. I did Arthur's Seat, so I climbed the main hill in the city to get an overlook. And a friend of mine was living there, and though he wasn't there those days, he gave me a lot of tips of where to walk through and do all the outdoor things, which I would have loved to do anyways. And I think it was nice because then the second time I went, I saw it with a lot more tourists. I did more of the museums, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yes, Edinburgh is such a beautiful city. I'm not surprised you enjoyed it so much. One of the few positives about COVID was fewer tourists around and being able to enjoy these cities. And of course, there's been such a tourism boom since then. And places like Edinburgh, Scotland are really popular right now. There's a ton of tourists, my goodness. Number 5 for me, I'm so thrilled to see you had written this one down because for about 3 or 4 years, Seb and I were obsessed with this city/town and wanted to move there forever. Yeah. So tell us about it, because I don't think many people know about this
Okay,
city.
exciting. Yeah, so we're staying in Europe. So this is Annecy in France, or Annecy as you probably would say it in English. So it's a small town or city, I think about 120,000 people. It's very near Geneva, so very near the Swiss border. And in fact, a lot of people living in Annecy work in Switzerland and cross the border every day because you earn well in Swiss franc, but living in France is a lot cheaper. And I first went there many, many years ago when I was maybe 11 or 12 with my parents when we were road tripping through Europe. But I remember just loving it so much. And at some point after New Zealand, I considered moving to France. I was going to move to Lyon. And a cousin of mine who grew up in Paris said, well, why don't you move to Annecy since you love nature and lakes and ocean so much? So I went there in the summer, which is also the perfect time to go to do all the outdoor things like swimming in the lake and hiking. I ended up actually moving to Annecy first for 6 months, but I've also been back once for a little bit when I was planning on actually moving there, but then due to some family things, I end up not. But it's my favorite town in Europe now. There are many beautiful towns in Europe, and I know I have not visited many. And every time I see National Geographic coverage of a small town in Spain, a small town in Poland, a small town in England, there are so many beautiful towns all over the world and especially in Europe. But Annecy for me is the perfect combination of nature. It is a small city or town, so you do have basically everything you need. You're very close to Geneva, a bigger city, an international airport. Annecy is quite safe. Maybe it helps that I speak quite good French. And of course, I improved my French a lot living in Annecy. I've told my dad that if I ever don't respond to messages for a few months because I need some Tati time or something has gone terribly wrong in my life, they'll find me there. So it'll be a safe place after all. And it's definitely a place where I could see myself living for longer, or maybe trying to see if I can buy a small apartment there and half the year or 4 months a year or so spending some time there.
I agree. And that medieval
Yes.
city center is so beautiful with the river running through it into the lake. It is so charming.
Yes, that's why they call it the small Venice of France. And also in winter, at least the winter I was there, they did projection mapping. So where they project a huge Christmas story onto the medieval buildings in the city. And that was lovely.
Oh, really? And something that I remember as well from the few visits that I've done there is the lake is like the perfect size. Like it's got all of these villages around the lake. You can easily cycle around the lake in 2-3 hours or something. The swimming is amazing. And on one side of the lake, there's these beautiful, quite large hills. I think you can go skiing
Yeah.
up there, and these lovely little alpine villages. So this kind of sweeping hills, quite high hills on one side, and then sort of more rolling hills on the other. It is just the perfect little place.
I didn't expect you to know it, but it's amazing.
Awesome. Let's talk about the next place, a place in Panama,
Yes.
a place I have not been to.
Places here, Bocas del Toro in Panama and National Park Manuel Antonio in Costa Rica. So as you will probably see from my list, I don't have a lot in Latin America, even though I have Latin American blood. I think I just prefer other places on this planet to travel in. But recently I did a whole Latin America trip and it was amazing. And a few years ago, before that trip though, with my former roommate in Chile, we became really close friends when I did an internship in 2018, 2019. I was actually doing an internship at the Knot Company back when they're very small. They're a huge vegan food company now. We both loved nature. And so we met up at San Jose, and from there we planned our week kind of last minute. But before getting there, I remember that on a flight once with Lufthansa flying to Germany, the stewardess was telling my dad and me how she'd just been to Costa Rica. And I said that it's a place I always wanted to go to because of the nature. And she said, if you go, also go to Bocas del Toro, a few islands in Panama, but right at the border with Costa Rica. I told my friend Dani about it, and we planned it out in such a way that we went from Costa Rica first all the way to Bocas del Toro, stayed on the small islands there, and then went back up through Costa Rica. And I love scuba diving. It's something I've been obsessed with for the past couple of years.
Yes.
I did scuba diving and it was beautiful. We did a little boat trip to the islands. And so there you can actually not stay for the night. You just stay for a few hours. We had a great time there. And then we went back up to Costa Rica. And then our first actual stop in Costa Rica after San Jose was the National Park Manuel Antonio. You cannot stay in the actual national park. You just stay a little bit outside. We stayed there for 2 nights. They actually have very limited hours to go into the national park, but also there you see wild monkeys, wild animals. You swim in the ocean, which is also a beautiful ocean. And in front of our hotel, just outside of the national park, was also this beautiful beach with darker waters and dark sands, but still beautiful. And also, it's very safe. Costa Rica is generally known to be a very safe country. One big plus was that we both speak Spanish. So even though everyone speaks English there, I think it is always nice when they can connect with you and speak Spanish with you.
We just did a stopover quickly in Panama on the way to Ecuador, and I really didn't know anything about Panama. I just thought about Panama City and the canal.
Yeah.
But there is some really beautiful stuff there. It's amazing.
Yes, definitely a country I also must visit more, and also Costa Rica.
Fabulous. Now, number 7 is a place near and dear to my heart. Another place that I could quite happily move to in a second. Go ahead.
Yes, so I figured that you would say that because I've been following you obviously on Instagram. And yes, it's also a place I would move to. So I went to Cape Town in 2022, stayed for 1 month in an Airbnb, and it was a combination of where I was staying and the city itself that made me fall in love with Cape Town. So as we both know, you have beautiful nature, you have the mountains. It is quite safe within South Africa, depending a little bit where you stay, but I was staying close to Table Mountain actually, so really just at the foot of it. And I was staying in a house, and the top floor was turned into an Airbnb. So I had my own kitchen, my own bathroom, my own room, but the family was staying underneath. And they'd sometimes invite me for a dinner because sometimes they asked me to take care of their dogs, which I gladly did. And they also had a pool that I could use. And then they treat me for dinner. And so I got along with the family very well. They had 2 kids about my age. And so we got along very well. We're actually still in touch. And I loved everything I did in Cape Town, from hiking to going to the icy beach that I didn't really go into the water, but it was still beautiful sitting there and reading. I did some day trips and free walking tours, huge fan of free walking tours. Did some in Cape Town, tried the wine, went to the coast, saw the penguins. And I know that I also just scratched the surface of South Africa. I'd love to go back into the whole flower route, for instance. But Cape Town, I think, was a nice place to also land after having done a lot of short stops within Africa before going to Cape Town. And it really was the break I needed and the location I needed. I know that Cape Town, South Africa, we both know it's still a country with huge contrasts and in terms of social and economical advantage and disadvantage. And it's still very much impacted by past colonialism, apartheid, and all of that. So I know I was very fortunate in terms of where I could stay, what I could afford. But even then, I think I got an idea of everyone within the city, and just the people I met, they were all lovely.
Yeah, yeah. South Africa people are so sweet, so kind, so fun. Yeah, I'm not surprised that you had that experience. You also have done a really interesting trip through Southern Africa. And when I look at this, I'm like, okay, I understand why she needed a break in Cape Town. Go ahead.
Exactly, because right after that one cold month in Cape Town, I ended up doing another crazy journey for 12 days. So with a small travel company, not that small actually, called Acacia Travel, that an acquaintance recommended to me. I did a trip through starting in Namibia and Windhoek, Botswana, Zambia, and I ended it in Zimbabwe, but some people did a 1 month trip. I just couldn't do that financially and because of my work then. What Acacia Travel does is they take school buses, or at least for the trip I did, and turn it into a travel van. And we weren't that big of a group, so we all had plenty of space in the bus. And we would go to different places, especially national parks, to do safaris, but also being by a river and learning about culture, a little bit of city life as well. And Parna actually said this wrong. I didn't start in Namibia Windhoek. I started in Swakopmund, so that was by the beach. There's still a lot of German presence back from pre-World War I times, I believe. But interesting for me to see all these names in German there and still a huge German community. You get a good idea of how the whole country looks like and also how nature changes. I especially love Botswana, the Okavango Delta, because you go through the river delta, all the wild animals. In Namibia, I just remember also being very calm and very safe. And then Zambia and Zimbabwe, I felt like a lot more energy, very positive energy, this kind of dancing and music that I love. And I ended it in Victoria Falls. That was my last stop. In all of these places, we were sometimes staying in small hotels or hostels or camping really out in the wild. And I love camping experiences except for when I'm freezing, but that rarely happens. So it was a lovely combination. And some days that also meant no electricity, obviously no Wi-Fi, no running water. And it's when you appreciate all those moments more, but also when you get to sleep under a starry sky. And yeah, I think that's why I call them my Zen experiences.
Yeah, all of that sounds amazing. This Acacia Travel converted bus, were you camping or did you have rooms within the
No,
bus?
the bus was really just a bus, like just a school bus
Okay,
to sit in. But we
I
would
see.
really put up our tent every night, or depending on what your budget. And I chose some nights then to stay in small hotel rooms. Sometimes we'd stop by a small hotel that also had camping grounds. So sometimes I'd stay in the hotel. Also, because during this time I was working a few hours still every day. So I kind of wanted a desk and Wi Fi to do that. Otherwise, I probably would have done the whole 12 days. Yeah.
And was there a guide
Yes.
with you as well? There was like a tour leader or a guide like showing you the wildlife? Because that's kind of a unique way to do a tour.
Yes, we had a driver, we had a guide for all the trip, but then in every place we had separate guides as well that would explain everything that would take us around. For example, in the Okavango Delta a little bit. If we were in Windhoek, then there was another one to explain us about traditional food, that sort of experiences. We always had our main tour guide in case anything needed support. Yeah.
I love that there's so many unique, interesting ways of exploring with Southern Africa of all different budgets. That's
Yeah.
super cool. Okay, number 9, we've got 3 to go.
Yes. So Muscat in Oman, so the capital. I went to Dubai for a few days and then to Oman. I was so nearby and it was just a country that I had on my map. I don't even know why, but I know many people went and I'd read that it was quite safe to go. So I went and yeah, not many people go. I know now, but Oman, a country I must go back to. Maybe it was the time of the year, maybe it was just in general that it was very calm. And I was staying in Muscat, but not in the city center. So staying kind of between, yeah, a little bit in the middle of nowhere, to be honest, in a small hotel that was cheap, that had a pool. There were lots of cats. And even though it is obviously a predominantly Muslim country, I think people understand that. I still try to be respectful in those countries, at least maybe not show shoulders, not show knees. But I love the food. So the Arabic food, very vegan friendly. I love the vibe. It smells so much like incense or like Frankenstein, the type of incense they produce there. I remember that from the moment I arrived in the hotel. And also the taxi driver that took me to my hotel was playing this calm music. And it was like the best impression. To start with, the Grand Mosque in Oman is beautiful and I highly recommend it. Beautiful beaches as well. I did a snorkeling trip and saw wild dolphins. And I'd love to go back to do scuba diving there.
Awesome. All right, we're going to hop on over to Japan.
Yeah,
now.
so Japan, I have spent there many months over the past 2, 3 years. But in 2023, when I went for the first time, I stayed for 1 week. I wish it had been a month on a green tea plantation. So, amongst many things that
Oh,
I'm obsessed with tea. So, yes, I'm currently drinking jasmine green tea. And I knew for many years that I wanted to do some volunteering on a green tea plantation because I love doing volunteering experiences on farms. And so I found this one. I said I was vegan. They were really accommodating. And that
oh,
was really a
wow.
volunteer experience where you don't have to pay. I just had to pay my train there. But then I got housing and food for free as long as I helped on the fields. And it was an organic green tea plantation. So most of my work consisted of just picking weeds. But also, I was there in June. So that's when they do the second harvest of the year. So I got to help out in the harvest. And the second harvest in the year is then fermented into black tea. So green tea and black tea come from the same plant. The first harvest in the spring, that is actually the green tea. The second one gets turned into the black tea. So I got to see the whole process, drink so much tea. I would fall asleep to the sounds of frogs and occasional rain, but it was warm already, so it was nice. There were 2 other interns and we got along so well. And it was in a small town and surrounded by hills, not many people around. It was very safe, obviously, because this is Japan. I just felt like I was immersed in tea and nature, some of my obsessions. So it couldn't have been any better. And that week, I actually completely disconnected from work, which I rarely do. And I think that helped a lot. Slept in a typical Japanese house, had delicious veganized food. And I told myself I must go back to this green tea plantation, but next time, hopefully for longer.
Fabulous. And how did you come across that volunteer opportunity?
Oh, so I just Googled volunteer green tea. farm volunteer experiences in Japan, and I found a few, some cost, and I emailed and they said, yes, that's the week you want to come, works out. It's free, just pay your train over here. We'll pick you up from the train station. And I think it was that combination that worked out perfectly.
I see. So you were very specific. Yes, I'm excited to be going back to Japan for our next group tour. And before the trip starts, me, Colleen, and David, we're going to do a tea tour, I should say, in Uji,
Amazing.
just close to Kyoto. So I'm super excited about that. We've got one more. This is so amazing. Let's finish off with your experience in Lombok, Indonesia.
Yes, so I was there quite recently. I'd only been to Bali before. So this time I did a almost 3 months ocean conservation course with the British organization called Source. So founded by a British couple, but most staff are actually Indonesian. It is a requirement and it's obviously great. And so I wanted to learn a lot more about ocean conservation through scuba diving. I was diving 3 to 4 times a day, except for Mondays, that was a dry day. And we were doing coral conservation work, mostly underwater, also doing surveys of seeing what animals were out there. Sometimes it was just a fun dive, obviously, recording the species that were there. I fell in love with nudibranchs, so a type of sea slug, many different types and colors, as you may know. And some parts of that reef, they're obviously quite destroyed. That's why they are doing conservation work because of bomb fishing. A lot of it was destroyed, but it is recovering. And that is very hopeful. And I also got to do my own little seagrass survey project. This I did just through snorkeling because it was not that deep, but it was also very interesting for me to do my own little project. And then also a little bit of mangrove conservation work on land, so planting mangroves. And I met a lot of people from all over the world. I learned a lot about nature. I lived by the beach for 3 months. Most of the food at this organization is vegan anyways. Indonesian food is quite vegan friendly anyways, but yes, here they rarely had any meat, and most of the days we had tofu and tempeh, and they were also very accommodating for vegans though. So have to say it was not the cheapest, but it was worth the experience after all. And also Lombok is becoming a hotspot for tourists now, moving from Bali to Lombok. But on the small island that we were on, or the part of Lombok that we were on, was still quite remote. So it was really a remote experience of waking up 6 in the morning to birds and then going to bed after sunset. And I saw my first shooting stars. Took me forever to see them, but I saw finally 3 shooting stars. And from there, I went to Cork to start my master's. And I just thought that it was going to be a good introduction, finishing my old job, diving a lot, ocean conservation work, and then start the master's.
Did it meet your expectations in that regard?
Yes, because I think the whole diving was obviously amazing, but also learning so much from all the guides, from the whole team. And even though I wouldn't say I came out of it saying, oh, this is the exact direction I want in my marine biology life, I think it just taught me that there's still a lot more to learn and it's a lot more diverse than I thought. And I am already a generalist. And I think even in marine biology, I'm going to be a generalist still because I just loved everything I did.
Awesome. Great. Okay. So you've had a very interesting life up until this point, doing lots and lots of interesting things, and you are studying. So what are your plans after you finish your master's? Do you see yourself continuing to be quite nomadic and being in different places?
Yeah, that's the $1 million questions I tell people, because for all these past years being a digital nomad, like especially 2018 onward, I was in New Zealand 7 months, everywhere else 4 months or less, in part also because of COVID. So it's been really moving a lot. So after Cork in April, as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm moving to Portugal because I'm going to do my master thesis there on barnacles. I miss Japan a lot and I miss Asia a lot. My best friend lives in Japan. She's German, but we met in Japan 2023. And since 2023, when I went to Japan, I said I want to go back at some point in my life and do language school there and have a little bit of fun and do something that's not super serious and work part-time in a coffee shop or in a matcha store. Actually, I found a vegan matcha cafe that would be my dream to work in. It's owned by a French guy. What I ended up doing is applying to language school in Kyoto, and I got accepted. End of September, moved to Kyoto with a stop in Taiwan. The plan is Kyoto for at least 6 months, if not even a year, maybe even longer. I'm going to start with 6 months because you pay language school every 6 months. I'll see if I stay the full year. I'll see if I find a job and stop language school intensively and just continue studying on my own. Maybe do a full year of language school and then I find a job. But I am going to be quite open. I think it'll just depend a bit on, is my desire to stay in Japan bigger? And I'll just pick any job to start with, just to have the visa sorted. I'm going to look at many countries in Asia. New Zealand is another big option. Even if I already have a flight, it's not a plan till I'm not in the airplane on my way there. Just because I have a flight and an Airbnb reservation somewhere, it doesn't mean that it's actually going to happen, unfortunately. So I don't want to get my hopes up high for anything really, and just be a bit more realistic, not negative, but just realistic.
I think it's a good idea to not get too attached to anything. Okay. And if you were talking to somebody who was listening to this and was thinking, oh my goodness, what an amazing life to sort of just be open to how things unfold and to how life unfolds, and to also be interested in so many things. What would you say to them? What advice would you give to help them try to manifest that?
Tough question, because I don't even know how I've done it. I think a bit along the lines of what we were just saying, of not getting too attached to anything. I think it's good to have dreams and ideas. I'm probably sometimes too optimistic with other people, not with myself. It is a tough world out there. When we're born, our parents don't tell us life's rough, because life has many beautiful things. But I think, yes, it is important to always keep an open mind, and it's good to have dreams and ideas and plans, but also be open to things changing. And also, even though for me still now a few things are hard to understand, so even if our plans don't happen the way we want them to, there is a reason for that, and there's a lot of learnings from that. So if we look back at all of this, whether the dreams work out the way we want them or not, at the end of the day, they make you, and hopefully they also allow you to become your own best friend, your own coach, your own company. And I think that's the best thing you can take out of all of this, whether it works out as we wanted it or not. And travel is great, and I want everyone to travel. If your dream is to stay in your hometown and build up an organic farm there, then go ahead and try that out and add on to it. If it doesn't work, start a new plan and just go a little bit with the flow, I think. That's my main takeaway for now. And I think, as I also mentioned in my notes there, my big life mantra, though, is just do it. Like the Nike quote says, I think it is one that I really go by. So just try it. And if it doesn't work, then you choose another way. If you don't win a battle, you can always stand up again.
I think we're so obsessed with having failure as a really negative thing and doing everything to avoid failing, in air quotes, that people really limit themselves. You know, there's something that I do, of course, from time to time, but I think trying and maybe not being super successful is better than not trying at all.
I absolutely agree. And there was actually a quote I heard this year, and I wrote it on a post-it and put it up on my wall, which said, it's not about winning the battle, it's about not being defeated. And I thought that applies so well to life.
I feel like this is a lovely way to finish our conversation, Tati. It was so lovely to chat with you. I feel so inspired, and I'm sure people listening to this podcast will feel the same. If people wanted to connect with you on Instagram or other places that you share online, how might they do that?
Yes, you can find me on LinkedIn as Tatiana von Rheinbaben, just to see a little bit my career path. But also I have 2 Instagram accounts, TatiVRP, which is my bigger, more artsy one, and then Global Citizen Tati, which is a really small one, and it's really just my collection of photos. I haven't really tried making it big out there. Social media is not my big focus. Art is, but not necessarily social media. So people can connect there to me. I'm happy to share travel tips. I have travel documents. I take courses on tourism and history from all over the world. So I have a huge collection of Google documents. And I'm always happy to chat with people about that, brainstorm for business ideas and volunteer ideas and project ideas. I have a lot of background projects running at the moment. We'll see which ones turn out, but I think that's probably the best way to connect to me. And thank you so much for having me. I don't think I've actually ever been on a podcast really speaking about all these travels. Even my best friends and probably even my parents don't know about all these places that I've been to. And it's really the first time that I'm speaking so openly about it. So thank you for this.
Oh, you're welcome. Maybe you can forward them this podcast and they can catch up on what it is that you've been doing.
Yes.
Thank you again so much, Tati.
Thank you. It's been lovely.